sure some of you are happy that I'm done with my yearly political video about video games, so it's back to reviewing. And what a better way to get back into the groove than reviewing a Sonic game. Yay.
As of lately, I've been thinking about shutting off comments for my Sonic reviews, because it sounds like a clouder of cats fighting for territory in a henhouse. Here, I'll play some for you. But since they haven't invented a method of splashing cold water on people through the internet yet, I have very little recourse. I've been saying it in nearly every single Sonic review lately, that Sonic fans cannot agree on anything. But it appears that that statement falls on deaf ears every single time I say it. So I've come to the conclusion that Sonic fans don't want to believe it, regardless of how obviously true it is. I'm not a Sonic fan, something that I seem to need to clarify every single time I do a Sonic review. But Sonic games are my platform game of choice, and I've grown up with the series. But I don't take a black and white stance on Sonic games. I don't look at them as Sonic games, but I just look at them as games and judge them based upon that, which would explain why I thought Sonic Boom was just an average run-of-the-mill platform game. As a Sonic game, a term that has multiple definitions that varies from person to person, it's not a Sonic game. It's a game with Sonic characters. But I've had a few Sonic fans tell me that they love all Sonic games regardless of quality. I think that if you're a fan of something and utter that phrase, you need to seriously reconsider the direction your life is going in, because you just admitted to spending money on and enjoying bad games, not even ironically. I'm not saying that all Sonic games are bad, but really there's only two in my book that are bad. The rest range from mediocre to awesome. But you get my point, which is to not be a blind fan to something. Sonic Team decided to focus on, and when it comes to Sonic and the Black Knight, Sonic Team decided to focus more on combat and cinematic design, rather than the level design used in Sonic Unleashed that released 4 months before Black Knight. The graphics for the Black Knight are much better than Secret Rings, which look closer to a PS2 game. But the Black Knight has more detail and better textures, although Sonic Colors still beats it by miles in terms of graphical quality. The cutscenes aren't like the painted comic book ones of the Secret Rings, but are more watercolored and are animated to a degree. The music is very good though. I really enjoyed the fantasy-based music, and the theme song is much better than Seven Rings in Hand, which in my opinion is the absolute worst theme song for a Sonic game.
Granted, I think that Sonic and the Secret Rings is the worst Sonic game I've ever played, and now I've played them all. Yes, all the Sonic games, and Secret Rings is still by far the worst one I've played.
Black Knight follows a similar motif to Secret Rings, but it drops the motion controls for everything except for one thing in favor of more traditional controls. Sonic no longer automatically runs, and there's no brake or tilting the controller backward or tilting it side to side or thrusting it forward to do a homing attack. Nope, you use the analog stick to move Sonic forward, left, right, or backwards. You jump with the A button, and hitting it again does the homing attack. And I find it to be completely useless, except for getting a little burst of speed from a stop position because I haven't had to work on any enemies. Now this is a Wii game, so they had to incorporate motion controls somehow, and they come in the form of swordplay. All you need to do is flick the Wiimote and Sonic swings it. But he really doesn't swing it in the way you swing the controller. It's more like each swing is part of a combo. You can block with the Z button, and the B button will activate the soul charge. When using this, when there's enemies around, a reticule will appear, letting you lock on. Flick the controller and Sonic will dash forward and destroy them. If there's no enemies around when you activate it, Sonic will dash forward in an extreme burst of speed.
Now you'd think that the controls would be much better given that the motion controls are used for attacking instead of movement, but you'd be wrong.
The controls feel pretty clumsy, and with the way that it feels, it's almost lazy. Moving left or right will send Sonic careening in that direction. I don't feel like I can ease Sonic left or right, resulting in going all the way or not at all. It feels like they took the motion controls of Secret Rings and applied them to the analog stick. While it works a lot better, it just feels lazy and needs polish. Especially when they could have taken a cue from Sonic Unleashed and had Sonic respond to the analog stick in the manner he did in that game. Additionally, there's a noticeable delay every time Sonic swings a sword. It's about half a second, but it's noticeable. Blocking also has a noticeable delay, so it's wise not to block at the very last second, but the second before the last second. Once you get used to that delay in blocking and attacking, the game can get pretty interesting, but that does not excuse the delay. The levels are like the ones from Secret Rings, very linear and very straightforward, and there seems to be invisible walls all over the sides of the paths. And not in the usual way either. In spots where it looks rather open, it's actually quite closed off. They're also pretty short, and the game doesn't just throw missions at you like Secret Rings did, meaning you can complete the game pretty quickly if you choose to do the missions that complete the main story. The game clocks in around 3 hours, which is a good length for a Sonic game.
The length of a game is kind of a funny debate right now. Everyone's complaining about the Order 1866's 5-hour runtime, but everyone says that it's a bland and boring, everyday, non-special shooter. So, why would you complain about that? I think 5 hours would be pretty fine right there.
The story is actually pretty good. I enjoyed the banter between Sonic and the Sword Caliburn. I liked the fantasy setting, and the characters were fun to watch as they took on new roles as the Knights of the Round Table. And if you know the story of the Sword and the Stone, you know exactly how this game ends. Or if you know anything about the story of King Arthur, which you should, as it's common knowledge. It's Sonic going through the story of King Arthur as told by the Sword and the Stone version. But the game also tosses in the Lady of the Lake version to give that game that telling of a legend feeling. While I enjoyed the story, I didn't enjoy the gameplay. The game does have a habit of tossing in hordes of enemies at you to overwhelming degrees. The hint system is absolutely terrible, and I mean absolutely terrible. I had to look up a guide a few times because the game gives you very vague instructions, and they're not even vague enough to work, because you'll do what the game is telling you only for it to not work. So you wonder if you're doing it wrong or if the game just isn't responding correctly, and the sad thing is, it can be a combination of both.
Sonic and the Black Knight isn't a bad game, but that doesn't mean that it's good either. It's mediocre at its best and its worst, and I can at least say with confidence that it's playable.
Sonic and the Black Knight got mediocre scores, except from anything published by Nintendo, who gave the game very high scores. Scores that this game clearly does not deserve. But that was Nintendo power. I don't think that they ever gave out low scores. Black Knight's levels aren't very inspired and the game is very repetitive. Your goals either consist of getting to the end of the stage, killing a certain number of enemies, or helping a certain number of people. The missions are very bland, but it's more streamlined than Secret Rings. Black Knight actually had the potential to be a pretty good Sonic game. If the controls were a little more polished and the level design more like Sonic Unleashed, then maybe swinging a sword around at high speeds could have been fun, especially if Sonic didn't slow down whenever the sword was swung. I do think that the storybook series could have kept going. It's a good concept with some fun story ideas. Imagine Sonic fighting Dracula or teaming up with Sherlock Holmes. But the lid was shut on any more of these games due to the poor reception, which I don't blame them, as you can tell that the series was very slowly evolving as if it wasn't much of a concern to them, and it shows.
This is the type of game that I can say is the epitome of bargain bin fodder. It's not terrible enough to be scorned, but it's not good enough to be praised either.